February 14th, Valentine's Day. For most people, it's a day of roses and chocolates. For me, it's the anniversary of the day I died. Well, the day the old Jane Reynolds died, anyway. I can still feel the cold if I close my eyes. It wasn't just the temperature, it was a physical weight pressing against my chest, making it impossible to breathe. I was 17 years old, standing in the foyer of my parents' colonial-style house in Connecticut. The hardwood floors were polished to a shine that looked like water. I was terrified of dripping melting snow onto them. "You have 10 minutes," my father, Carter Reynolds, said. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. That was the terrifying thing about my father. He delivered devastating news with the same tone he used to order a steak medium rare.
"Pack a bag, whatever you can carry, and then you leave." My mother, Margaret, stood by the fireplace. She wasn't looking at me. She was adjusting a vase of imported lilies, plucking a slightly wilted petal with manicured fingers. "We have a reputation, Jane. Your father is up for partner next year. We will not, have a pregnant teenager parading around this town, ruining everything we've built." "But Mom," I choked out, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. I was only 4 months along, barely showing, but to them, I was already a monster. "It's snowing. It's a blizzard out there. Where am I supposed to go?" She finally turned to me. Her eyes were dry, cold, empty. "That's not our problem anymore. You made your choice."
"You chose to be a whore. Now you can live like one." The word hung in the air, sharp and ugly. "Mark," I whispered. "Mark said he would help." My father laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound. "Mark? The boy from the country club? We just got off the phone with his parents. He's going to Yale in the fall, Jane. He's not throwing his life away for your mistake. He says it's not his, and we believe him." "It is his," I screamed, the tears finally spilling over hot and fast. 10 minutes, Jane," my father repeated, checking his Rolex. "Or I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. You are not our daughter anymore. As far as the neighbors know, you're going to a boarding school in Switzerland. Don't call us. Don't come back." I scrambled up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I grabbed a duffel bag. I stuffed in sweaters, socks, a warm hat. I grabbed my photo album, then stopped. I looked at a picture of us, me, Mom, Dad, and Kevin, my younger brother, at Disney World. We looked happy. It was a lie. I ripped the photo in half and left it on the bed. When I walked out that front door, the wind hit me like a physical blow. The snow was coming down in sheets, blinding white. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me, and I heard the distinct click of the deadbolt. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood, waiting for it to open, waiting for my mother to run out, crying, saying it was a mistake. The porch light flickered off. Darkness. That was 20 years ago. I opened my eyes, pulling myself back to the present. The memory faded, replaced by the soft hum of my sub-zero refrigerator and the smell of fresh espresso. I was standing in my kitchen, a kitchen that cost more than my parents' entire first floor. I ran my hand over the cool Carrara marble countertop. I wasn't that shivering 17-year-old girl anymore. I was Jane Reynolds, owner of The Hearth, a chain of 5-star farm-to-table restaurants across the tri-state area. I was a survivor. My phone buzzed on the counter, a notification from Google Alerts. Dr. Leo Reynolds becomes the youngest head of cardiothoracic surgery in state history at 20 years old. I smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through my chest. Leo, my son, my beautiful, brilliant boy. The mistake they threw out in the snow. He had graduated high school at 13, Harvard Med at 17. He was a miracle. I tapped the article. There was a picture of him, looking handsome in his white coat, holding a scalpel with steady hands. The headline was bold, "The Boy Wonder of Medicine." I took a sip of my coffee, feeling a sense of peace I had fought 2 decades to achieve. We had done it. We had won. We didn't need them. We never needed them. But then, Another notification popped up. An email. Subject: Family reunion. Important matter regarding Leo. My blood ran cold. I recognized the sender immediately. C. Reynolds at lawpartners.com. My father. I hadn't spoken to them in 20 years. Not when I was sleeping in a shelter. Not when I was working 3 shifts as a waitress. Not when Leo had pneumonia and I couldn't afford antibiotics. I clicked open the email, my fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a sudden rising rage. Jane, dear, we saw the news about Leo. Incredible. We always knew he had the Reynolds genes. We think it's time to put the past behind us. We're driving up to see you both. We need to discuss his future and the management of his new assets. We are family after all. See you tonight at the hearth. I stared at the screen. Reynolds genes? Assets? They didn't want a reunion. They smelled money. They smelled success. I set my coffee cup down, hard. The ceramic chipped slightly on the marble. You want to see us? I whispered to the empty, luxurious room. Okay, Dad. Come and see what I've become.
To understand why I didn't crumble when I got that email, you have to understand what happened after that door slammed 20 years ago. I didn't go to a shelter immediately. I was too proud and too stupid. I walked. I walked until my feet were numb blocks of ice. I ended up in Riverside Park, huddling inside a concrete tunnel near the playground, trying to shield my belly from the wind. I stayed there for 3 nights. I had $40 in my pocket and a bag of clothes. By the 3rd morning, I was delirious. I wasn't shivering anymore, which I knew enough to know was a bad sign. Hypothermia was setting in. That's when I saw her. A tiny woman, wrapped in a coat that looked 3 sizes too big, walking a pug that looked as grumpy as she did. She stopped in front of me. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with assessment. You plan on dying here, or are you just stupid? She barked. Her voice sounded like gravel in a blender. I tried to speak, but my jaw was frozen shut. Pregnant, she stated, looking at the way I was clutching my midsection. Get up. I can't, I rasped. I didn't ask if you could. I said get up. She reached out a hand. It was calloused and warm. That was Martha Higgins. She dragged me back to her brownstone. It smelled like garlic, old books, and expensive tobacco. She put me in a hot bath, fed me soup that tasted like heaven, and didn't ask me a single question for 2 days. When I finally told her my story about the parents, the reputation, the boyfriend who abandoned me, she didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She lit a cigarette. She was trying to quit, she always said, and blew smoke at the ceiling. Good, she said. Good? I looked at her, horrified. My life is over. Your life as a doormat is over, Martha corrected. Now your life as a human being begins. They did you a favor, kid. They showed you exactly who they are. Now you don't have to waste decades trying to please people who would trade you for a country club membership. Martha wasn't just a kind old lady. I learned later she was a shark, a self-made millionaire who owned half the commercial real estate on the East Side. She had lost her own daughter, Sophia, in a car accident 5 years prior. Sophia had been pregnant too. I'm not replacing her, Martha told me one night, looking at Leo's ultrasound picture on her fridge. And you're not replacing me. But we both got a hole in our hearts, and maybe we can patch them up together. Martha taught me everything. She didn't just give me money. She gave me a job in the kitchen of her first restaurant. I started washing dishes, then prep cook, then line cook. Write it down, she would snap at me when I learned a new recipe or a supplier's negotiation tactic. Keep receipts for everything, in business and in life. If it's not on paper, it didn't happen. She was obsessed with documentation. People lie, Jane. Numbers don't. Contracts don't. Keep the receipts. When Leo was born, during another snowstorm, ironically, Martha was the one holding my hand. She cut the cord. She was the one who rocked him to sleep so I could study for my GED and then my business degree online. She was his grandmother in every way that mattered. She paid for his piano lessons, his advanced math tutors.
When he got into Harvard at 16, she bought the most expensive bottle of champagne in the city, popped it, and drank a toast to the ones who walked away. But Martha was getting old. Her heart was failing. 6 months ago, she called me into her study. The ring was dim. She was sitting in her leather chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Jane," she said, her voice weak but her eyes sharp. "I've updated my will." "Don't talk like that," I said, sitting by her knee. "Shut up and listen," she scolded gently.
"I'm leaving everything to you and Leo. The properties, the stocks, the cash. It's about $20 million. I gasped. "Martha, I can't." "It's not a gift. It's a weapon," she interrupted. "Because they will come back. Your parents, that rat-faced boyfriend. When they see how high you've climbed, they'll try to chop down the ladder." She handed me a heavy, leather-bound folder. "This is the will. But there's a clause in here, a special one. My lawyer calls it a poison pill. You don't tell them about it. Not until the trap is shut. Understand?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I understand." "Promise me." She gripped my hand. "You won't let them take a dime. You won't let them near Leo." "I promise." She died 3 days later.
So, standing in my kitchen, staring at that email from my father, I wasn't just angry. I was armed. I felt the spirit of Martha Higgins standing right behind me, smelling of garlic and smoke, whispering, "Get the receipts, Jane." I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "David," I said when the deep, calm voice answered. "David Vance, my lawyer, my partner, the man who loved Leo like his own." "Jane, what's wrong? You sound—" "My parents are coming," I said, my voice steady now, cold. "Tonight. I need you to open the safe. Get the box." "The Pandora box?" David asked, his tone shifting instantly from concern to professional readiness. "Yes, it's time to let the demons out." The hearth was fully booked that night. The clatter of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the jazz playing softly in the background, it was usually a symphony to my ears. Tonight, it sounded like noise. I stood at the hostess stand, my spine rigid. David stood next to me, looking like a statue in his charcoal suit. He reached out and squeezed my hand discreetly. "I'm right here," he murmured. "You don't have to do this alone." "I know," I said, but inside I felt that old, familiar tremble. The body remembers trauma even when the mind has healed. Then the door opened. They walked in like they owned the place. Carter Reynolds had grayed, his posture slightly stooped, but he still wore that arrogant sneer. Margaret was draped in a fur coat that looked too heavy for the season, her face pulled tight by one too many facelifts. And behind them, Kevin, my brother, the golden child. He looked terrible. His suit was expensive but ill-fitting. His eyes were darting around the room nervously, sweating despite the air conditioning. He was 35 now, but he looked 50. My father spotted me. He didn't look ashamed. He smiled, a wide, shark-like smile. "Jane," he boomed, spreading his arms as if expecting a hug. "Look at this place. Margaret, look at what our girl has built." Every head in the waiting area turned. The audacity took my breath away. Our girl. I didn't move. I didn't smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds," I said, keeping my voice professional. "You have a reservation?" My mother's smile faltered. "Mr. and Mrs.? Jane, darling, don't be silly. We're your parents." She moved to peck my cheek, but I took a step back. She kissed the air. "We have a table in the private room," I said, gesturing to the back, away from the other guests. "Excellent," my father said, adjusting his tie. "VIP treatment. That's what I like to see." Once we were seated in the private dining room, the mask slipped. My father didn't even look at the menu. He poured himself a glass of water and looked at me. "So, the boy, Leo, a surgeon at 20? "He's brilliant," I said. "No thanks to you." "Now, Jane," my mother sighed, "let's not dwell on ancient history. We made a decision for the family back then. It was hard for us, too."
"Hard for you?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I was homeless. I ate out of garbage cans for 3 days before Martha found me. "And look at you now," Kevin piped up, his voice jittery. "You're rich. You own all this. It made you tough, right? It was character building." I looked at Kevin. I really looked at him. "Why are you here, Kevin? You haven't called me in 2 decades." "We saw the news," my father interjected, "about Martha Higgins passing away and Leo's success. We realized that life is too short for grudges. We want to be part of Leo's life. He needs his grandfather. He needs guidance on how to manage his new stature." "Guidance," David spoke up for the first time. "You mean financial management?" My father eyed David with disdain. "And who is this?" "This is my lawyer," I said. "We don't need lawyers," my mother said quickly, her voice shrill. "We are family. We just want to help. We heard Leo inherited quite a bit from that woman. A boy that young with millions of dollars? It's dangerous. We can set up a trust. Your father has experience with this." There it was. They hadn't been in the room for 5 minutes, and they were all ready for Leo's wallet. "Leo is an adult," I said. "He manages his own money, and he has me." "But well, Jane, you're in the restaurant business," my father sneered slightly. "Finance is different. It requires sophistication. Look, we're willing to oversee the portfolio for a standard fee. Keep it in the family." "Standard fee?" I felt a vein throb in my temple. "You kicked me out because of your reputation. Now you want to charge me a fee to steal my son's inheritance?" "Steal is a harsh word," Kevin muttered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "It's protecting." "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" My father stood up. "Get out of my restaurant. The meal is on the house. Consider it the last thing you will ever get from me." My mother's face twisted. The sweet facade vanished. "You ungrateful little brat. We gave you life. We raised you for 17 years. And you abandoned me when I needed you most." I stood up, leaning over the table. "You aren't family. You're strangers with the same last name. Leave, now, or I call security." My father glared at me, his face turning purple. "You'll regret this, Jane." "You think you're untouchable because you have a little money now? We have rights, grandparents' rights. We'll see a judge." "Try it," David said, his voice low and dangerous. They stormed out. But as they left, I saw the look in Kevin's eyes. It wasn't anger. It was desperation. Pure, unadulterated panic. I sat down, my legs giving way. "They're not going to stop," David said, pouring me a glass of water. "No," I said, watching the door swing shut. "They're not. Did you see Kevin?" "I did," David nodded. "He looks like a man with a gun to his head." "We need to find out why," I said. "Why now? Why specifically now? It's not just the inheritance. It's something else." I pulled out my phone. "I'm hiring a private investigator. I want to know everything about Kevin Reynolds. Every debt, every credit card, every dirty secret." David opened his briefcase. "I'll start pulling the records on grandparents' rights in this state. It's a weak case, but if they get a sympathetic judge—" "We won't let it get that far," I said, my voice hardening. The initial shock of seeing them was fading, replaced by the icy clarity Martha had taught me. "Open the box, David." 2 days later, the private investigator's report landed on my desk. It was a thick manila envelope, but the story it told was simple and pathetic. Kevin wasn't just a failure, he was a catastrophe. While I was building an empire from dishwater and grit, the golden child had been burning through my parents' savings, failed startups, a divorce, and gambling. $5 million, David said, reading the summary over my shoulder. He owes $5 million to a syndicate in Atlantic City, and they aren't the kind of people who send late notices. They send guys with baseball bats. That's why he was sweating, I murmured, flipping through photos of Kevin entering a shady casino. Mom and Dad are tapped out. They mortgaged the house twice to cover his previous messes. They're broke, David. That's why the fur coat looked old. That's why Dad's suit was shiny at the elbows.
They don't want to manage Leo's money, David concluded. They want to liquidate it to save Kevin. It was disgusting. But then I saw the next part of their plan. My phone started blowing up. Notifications from Facebook, Twitter, even local news sites. I clicked on a link. It was a video of my mother, Margaret, sitting on a couch, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. She was being interviewed by a local blogger. "We just want to see our grandson," she sobbed on screen. "We made mistakes in the past, sure. We were strict. But Jane, she's kept him from us. She's poisoned his mind. She's vindictive. We hear she's unstable. We worry about Leo's safety with all that money and no father figure." The comment section was filling up fast. "Poor grandparents. How can a daughter be so cruel? Money changes people. Shame on Jane Reynolds." I felt tears prick my eyes, not of sadness, but of frustration. The injustice of it was suffocating. They were rewriting history. They were turning me into the villain in my own survival story. "Jane," David put a hand on my shoulder, "don't read the comments." "They're calling me unstable," I whispered, my voice trembling. "They're saying I'm dangerous." I started to cry, just a little. The old Jane, the scared teenager, wanted to curl up in a ball. I wanted to scream. "It's not fair. They threw me out. They are the monsters." I looked at the screen again. My mother looked straight into the camera. "If you're watching, Leo, we love you. We just want to bring you home." Bring you home. Like he was a lost puppy. Like I hadn't spent every waking moment for 20 years ensuring he had a home filled with love. Something inside me snapped. It was a physical sensation, a sharp crack in my chest, followed by a rush of cold air. The tears stopped instantly. My breathing slowed. The heat of my anger cooled into a solid block of ice. I wiped my face. I stood up and walked over to the wall safe hidden behind a painting of the ocean Martha had given me. "Jane?" David asked, stepping back slightly. He knew that look. It was the look I got before I acquired a competitor. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. Click. I pulled out a steel box, Pandora's box. Inside wasn't money. It was 20 years of pain converted into data. "They want to play the victim?" I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "They want to talk about stability? About father figures?" I pulled out a stack of yellowed papers. I kept every letter. Every returned birthday card I sent them the first year, marked "Return to Sender." I kept the medical bills from when I gave birth alone. I kept the eviction notice from my first apartment. I reached deeper into the box and pulled out a USB drive. And I have the security footage from Martha's old house, from the day they came to yell at her for harboring a fugitive. I turned to David. I wasn't crying anymore. I poured myself a glass of water and took a sip. "They want a war? Okay. But they forgot one thing. They think they're fighting the scared little girl they kicked out. They don't realize they're fighting Martha Higgins's protege." "What's the plan?" David asked, opening his laptop. "First," I said, laying the photos of Kevin's gambling debts on the table, "we let them think they're winning. We let them get arrogant. Hubris is their family trait. It will be their downfall." "And the lawsuit?" "Let them file it," I said. "Let them put it on public record. Let them stand before a judge and swear they are loving grandparents. Because when you lie in court, it's not just drama, it's perjury." I looked at the photo of my mother on the screen. "You want to bring Leo home, Mom? Be careful. You might just burn your own house down." Just then, my phone rang. It wasn't a notification. It was a call from an unknown number. I answered. "Jane?" The voice was male, oily, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. It had been 20 years, but I would know that voice anywhere. "Mark," I said. "Hey, Janie," he said. He sounded drunk, or high, or both. "Long time no see. I saw your folks on the internet. They say you're keeping my boy from me." My hand tightened on the phone. "My boy? He's not your boy, Mark. You denied him. You said he wasn't yours. Yeah, well, I was young, he slurred. I've changed. I think it's time we reunite. Be a family. I hear the kid is loaded. He needs his dad. I looked at David. He was already tracing the call. How much did they pay you, Mark? I asked quietly. What? My parents. How much did they pay you to call me? There was a pause, then a laugh. $5,000, up front, another 5 if I get a DNA test. But hey, maybe you can offer me a better deal to go away? I smiled, a cold, predatory smile. I pressed the record button on my desk phone, even though the automated system was already capturing it. I'm listening, Mark. Tell me everything. The call with Mark was short, but it gave me everything I needed to know. He was exactly who I remembered, a spineless coward who followed the money. My parents were desperate enough to bring him into the fold, the man who had ruined their reputation 20 years ago. That showed just how deep in the hole Kevin was. But the public didn't know that. 2 days later, Mark Sloan was on the morning news. Good morning, Springfield. I sat in my living room with Leo, watching the TV. I wanted to turn it off, but Leo insisted. I need to see this, Mom, he said. His face was pale, his jaw set. He looked so much like me in that moment, it hurt. Mark was sitting on the studio couch, wearing a sweater vest that made him look like a misunderstood academic. He looked older, puffy around the eyes, but he could still turn on the charm. I was a scared kid, Mark told the host, wiping a fake tear. I wanted to be there, I did, but Jane, she disappeared. Her parents told me she went to Europe. I spent 20 years looking for them. I didn't know I had a son until I saw the news last week. Liar, Leo whispered. The host leaned in sympathetically. And now that you know Leo is a successful doctor, how does it feel? It's bittersweet, Mark sighed. I'm proud, so proud, but I missed everything. His first steps, his graduation. I just want a chance to apologize, to be a father, but Jane won't let me near him. The audience awed. My phone buzzed, a text from a supplier. Jane saw the news. Maybe you should let the father see him. It's bad for business to look so heartless. My chest tightened. They were winning the PR war. People love a redemption story. They love the idea of a broken family healing. They didn't care about the truth. Mom, Leo said, turning to me. He wrote you a letter, didn't he, when you told him you were pregnant? I nodded. He did. Do you still have it? I have everything, Leo. Leo stood up. He was taller than me now, broad-shouldered and confident. He wasn't a child anymore. They're not just attacking you now. They're attacking us. They're making you look like a monster to get to my money. I can handle it, I said. I know you can, Leo said, sitting next to me and taking my hand. But you don't have to. I'm not a prop in their play. I'm a surgeon. I deal with facts. And the fact is, they are a cancer. He looked at the TV, where Mark was now showing a fake photo of a baby he claimed was the one picture I had. It was a stock photo. I knew it. We need to cut it out, Leo said, before it spreads. Later that afternoon, the situation escalated. I went to check on one of my restaurants downtown. As I walked from the parking lot, a camera crew jumped out of a van. Jane Reynolds, a reporter shoved a microphone in my face. Is it true you hid your pregnancy to keep the baby from his father? No comment, I said, pushing past them. Your parents say you're mentally unstable. Are you fit to manage your son's estate? Get out of my way, I snapped. Are you keeping them apart because you want the money for yourself? I stopped. I turned to the camera. I shouldn't have done it, but I was furious. My son is a grown man, I said, staring into the lens. And my parents and my ex-boyfriend are vultures. They don't want a family. They want a payday. I walked into the restaurant, shaking. Betty, my manager for the last 10 years, was waiting with a glass of wine. She was a big woman with a no-nonsense attitude. Honey, you look like you're ready to kill someone. I might be, I said, downing the wine. Your brother called, Betty said, handing me a slip of paper. He left a message. He said, tell Jane to stop being stubborn. The offer for management is still on the table. If she agrees, the interviews stop. It's blackmail, I said, pure and simple. So what are you going to do? Betty asked. I looked around my restaurant. I looked at the staff I had trained, the customers enjoying the food I had created. I had built this from nothing. I had built a life from the ashes of their rejection. I'm going to bury them, I said. Betty, pull the security tapes from tonight. I want proof of the harassment. Already done, Betty winked. I went back to David's office that night. The atmosphere was heavy. It's getting worse, David said. The public opinion is shifting. People are starting to boycott the restaurants. They think you're a bitter ex, keeping a father from his son.
Mark Sloan has 3 DUI convictions and hasn't held a job in 5 years, I said, throwing a file on the desk. Did the news mention that? No, David said, because Mark didn't tell them, and we haven't spoken up. We speak up in court, I said, not on a talk show. They filed the motion, David said softly. He slid a document across the desk. Motion for grandparents' visitation rights. Petition for auditing of the estate of Martha Higgins. And the kicker, petition to establish paternity, Mark Sloan. They want a DNA test, David said. If Mark is the father, he has grounds to sue for custody rights, or at least to contest the will if he can prove you defrauded him. I laughed. Defrauded him? He told me to get an abortion. Prove it, David said. He was playing devil's advocate. He needed me to be ready. I reached into my bag and pulled out the Pandora box again. I found a small, crinkled envelope. It smelled like cheap cologne, the kind Mark used to wear in high school. I opened it. Inside was a piece of notebook paper. Jane, my dad says if I admit it's mine, I lose my scholarship. I'm not ruining my life for you. Get rid of it. If you don't ever talk to me again. You're on your own. Mark. It was dated. Signed. David read it. He looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. This is gold. I have more, I said. I have the recording of him asking for a bribe yesterday. We can destroy him, David said, but we have to time it right. If we release this now, the parents will just pivot. They'll claim they didn't know. They'll throw Mark under the bus to save themselves. We need them all in the same net, I said. We need them to commit, to lie under oath. We need a trap, David said. I have an idea, I said, looking at the date on the calendar. Leo's birthday is next week. Let's throw a party, a big one. The war room. That's what we called my dining room for the next 3 days. The mahogany table was covered in stacks of paper. On the left, the lies. Transcripts of my mother's interviews, Mark's sobbing TV appearance, the legal filings full of fabricated claims about my mental instability. On the right, the truth, my receipts. I spent hours organizing them. It was painful, digging through the debris of my past. Reading that letter from Mark again made me feel sick. Looking at the hospital bill for my delivery, patient Jane Reynolds, emergency contact none, brought back the crushing loneliness of that hospital room. But Martha's voice was in my head. Use the pain. Make it work for you. Okay, David said, pacing the room. Let's review the inventory. Item 1, I said, holding up a USB drive. Surveillance footage, February 15th, 2005. My parents banging on Martha's door. You can clearly hear my father yelling, I don't care if she starves, just don't let her use the Reynolds name. Admissible, David nodded. Proves malice and abandonment. Counters their claim of we lost touch. Item 2, I pointed to a stack of bank statements. Kevin's financial records, the $5 million debt. The transfers from my parents' accounts to the casino. Motive, David said. Proves this isn't about love, it's about liquidity. Item 3, I held up the recording of Mark's phone call. $5,000 up front, another 5 if I get a DNA test. Solicitation of a bribe, conspiracy to commit fraud. David grinned. That sends Mark to jail. And finally, I picked up a blue folder. Martha's video diary. We hadn't watched this one yet. I knew it existed, Martha had told me, but I hadn't had the strength to watch her face since the funeral. We need to see it, David said gently. I nodded and plugged the drive into the TV. The screen flickered. And there she was, Martha, sitting in her favorite armchair, a glass of scotch in her hand. She looked frail, but her eyes were fierce.
"Hello, Jane. Hello, Leo," the video Martha said. "If you're watching this, the vultures are circling. I knew they would. Parasites always come back when the host gets healthy." I choked back a sob. "Now listen closely," Martha continued. "I've left a provision in the trust, Clause 14B, the scorched earth clause. My lawyers have the details. But basically, if any biological relative of Jane Reynolds attempts to contest will, or sue for custody, or demand financial oversight, the money vanishes." She took a sip of scotch. "It doesn't go to you, Jane. Sorry. It goes immediately to the New Beginning Shelter for Teen Moms. All 20 million. Poof. Gone." Martha grinned at the camera. "So let them sue. Let them drag you to court. Because the moment the gavel bangs, they ensure that nobody gets a dime, especially not them." The screen went black. Silence filled the room. "My God," David whispered. "She was a genius." "It's a poison pill," I said, realizing the brilliance. "If they win the lawsuit for control, they inherit nothing. The money leaves the account the second they gain access." "But," David paused, "if we use this, you lose the money too, Jane. Leo loses it." "I don't care about the money," I said. "I have my business. Leo has his career. We never needed Martha's money to survive. We just need them to not have it." "But here's the kicker," David said, his lawyer brain working fast. "We don't tell them yet. We let them spend money on lawyers. We let them dig the hole deeper. We reveal this after they've perjured themselves, after they've admitted their true motive is the money." "Exactly," I said. The doorbell rang. It was a courier. He handed me a large envelope. "You've been served," he mumbled, and walked away. I opened the packet. Summons to appear. Plaintiffs, Carter and Margaret Reynolds. Defendant, Jane Reynolds. Subject, emergency custody hearing and estate audit. They weren't waiting. They had convinced a judge to grant an emergency hearing, claiming Leo was being financially abused and manipulated by me. Monday morning. I read the date. 9 a.m. "They're moving fast," David said. "Kevin's bookies must be getting impatient." "Let's go to the hospital," I said suddenly. "Why?" "Because that's where they'll be. They know Leo is on shift. They want a photo up. They want to look like worried grandparents checking on their grandson." "Jane, that's dangerous. Confronting them?" "I'm not confronting them," I said, grabbing my purse. "I'm going to let them hang themselves." I was right. When we pulled up to Springfield Memorial, the Channel 7 news van was already there. My parents were standing in the lobby, arguing with security. "We have a right to see him," my mother was shrieking, playing to the cameras. "He's our grandson." I walked in, head held high. David was a step behind me. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. The cameras turned to me. "Jane," my father stepped forward, looking every bit the aggrieved patriarch. "Stop this nonsense. Let us see the boy." "He's working," I said, calm, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "He's saving lives, something you know nothing about." "How dare you?" My mother lunged forward. "We are here to save him from you." Leo appeared from the elevators. He was wearing his scrubs, looking exhausted but focused. "What is going on?" Leo asked. "Leo," my mother cried, rushing towards him. "Oh, look at you, my baby." Leo stepped back. "Don't touch me." It happened in slow motion. My father, frustrated and arrogant, grabbed Leo's arm. "Show some respect to your grandmother." "Let go of him," I shouted, stepping between them. My father raised his hand and slapped me. Smack. The sound echoed through the lobby. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The cameras flashed blindingly. My cheek burned, but inside I was smiling, because he had just assaulted me on live television. "You hit me," I said quietly, touching my face. My father looked at his hand, then at the cameras. He realized his mistake. She provoked me. She's hysterical." Security guards swarmed him. "Sir, come with us." "I'm suing you," my father screamed as they dragged him out. "I'm taking everything." I looked at the camera lens, tears welling up, real tears this time, from the sting of the slap, but also from relief. "Gotcha,"
The slap was the turning point. Before that moment, it was a family dispute. He said, she said. But violence? Violence changes the narrative. Within an hour, the clip of Carter Reynolds backhanding his daughter in a hospital lobby was trending on Twitter.
The hashtag toxic parents started appearing, but the Reynolds family didn't back down. That was their hubris. Instead of apologizing, they doubled down. Their lawyer, a sleek, oily man named Mr. Sterling, released a statement. Mr. Reynolds was under extreme emotional distress caused by his daughter's alienation of affection. He regrets the physical contact, but maintains that Jane Reynolds is a danger to the family unit. They spun it. They actually tried to spin a physical assault as my fault. That night, Leo came home silent. He sat at the kitchen island, staring at his hands. I could have stopped him, Leo said. I should have hit him back. No, I said, putting an ice pack on my cheek. If you had hit him, you'd be the violent one. You'd be the unstable grandson.
You did exactly the right thing, Leo. You let the world see who they are. Does it hurt? He asked, touching the bruise forming on my jaw. Not as much as the cold did 20 years ago, I said honestly. The next morning, the emergency hearing was canceled. The judge, having seen the news, decided there was no immediate danger to Leo from me. However, the civil suit regarding the estate audit and the grandparents' visitation was still on the docket for the following week. And they had a new tactic. Kevin called the restaurant, but he didn't ask for me. He asked for Betty. He offered me $10,000, Betty told me later, her face pale, to let him into the office, to find evidence that you were embezzling from the business. He's desperate, I said.
The loan sharks must be closing in. I told him to go to hell, Betty said. But Jane, he sounded scary, like manic. We need to end this, I said. We can't wait for the court date next week. We need to force a settlement. Or a confession. How? David asked. The negotiation, I said. We invite them, all of them. Parents, Kevin, Mark. We tell them we're ready to settle. We tell them the slap scared me, and I'm ready to make a deal to make it all stop. They'll think you're weak, David warned. Exactly, I smiled. They always have. They think I'm the scared little girl. They think they broke me at the hospital. Let's give them what they want. A victory lap. I set up the meeting at Bernardino's, a small Italian restaurant I owned on the edge of town.
It was closed on Mondays, perfect for privacy. We rigged the place. David hired a professional AV team, microphones under the table, cameras in the flower arrangements, cameras in the smoke detectors. This is entrapment, David joked nervously as we tested the audio. It's not entrapment if they voluntarily confess to crimes they've already committed, I corrected. We're just documenting, like Martha taught me. The night of the meeting, I dressed simply. No power suit. I wore a soft cardigan and minimal makeup. I wanted to look tired. I wanted to look beaten. They arrived promptly at 7 p.m. My father's arm was in a sling, a prop, I was sure, to garner sympathy for the scuffle at the hospital. My mother wore black, like she was in mourning. Kevin looked jittery, his eyes bloodshot. And Mark strutted in like he had already won the lottery. Jane, my father said, sitting down at the head of the table, I'm glad you finally came to your senses. I just wanted to stop, I said, keeping my voice low and trembling. The cameras, the news, it's too much. Leo can't work. It's all very regrettable, my mother sniffed, but you forced our hand, dear. So, Kevin slammed his hand on the table. Let's talk numbers. The audit. We know the old lady left about 20 mil. We figure a 50-50 split is fair for pain and suffering and past child support that mom and dad provided. Child support? I looked up. You kicked me out. Room and board for 17 years ain't cheap, Kevin sneered. Plus, we need to pay Mark here for his silence regarding the custody suit. Mark grinned, picking his teeth. Yeah, Janie, I figured $2 million is fair for missed fatherhood. I looked at David. He gave a microscopic nod. Keep them talking. I don't have access to the full $20 million yet, I lied. The probate is slow. Don't lie to us, my father snapped. We know you have access. We know you can sign the checks. Look, Jane, here's the deal. You sign over control of the trust to me as the executor. We give you a monthly allowance. We pay off certain debts, he glanced at Kevin, and we drop the lawsuits. We go on TV, we cry, we say we're a happy family again. The boycott ends. Your business is saved. And if I say no, then we destroy you, my mother said.
Her voice was pure venom. We tell the world you were a drug addict. We tell them you stole from Martha. We have witnesses. You'd lie under oath? I asked. Who's gonna believe you? My father scoffed. You're a high school dropout restaurant cook. We are the Reynolds. We have standing. And the money? I looked at Kevin. Is this really about the gambling debt, Kevin? The room went silent. Kevin froze. How did you... Kevin started, then stopped. It doesn't matter, my father shouted. Yes, okay, Kevin is in trouble. He needs $5 million by Friday. You have $20 million sitting there doing nothing. He's your brother. You owe him. I owe him? I repeated. You embarrassed this family, my father yelled. You owe us everything. You should have aborted that kid like we told you. But now that he's a cash cow, you will share the milk. Cash cow. I felt the recording device taping to my chest heat up. Or maybe it was just my heart. So, Mark chimed in, do we have a deal? Or do I tell the press that you slept with my brother too? I looked at Mark. You don't have a brother. The press doesn't know that, Mark winked. It was sickening. They were laying out every crime, every conspiracy, every lie, right there on the checkered tablecloth. I need a moment, I said, standing up shakily. I need to go to the ladies' room. Then I'll sign. Make it quick, Kevin said, checking his watch. I have a deadline. I walked into the bathroom. I locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror. I wasn't looking at a victim. I was looking at the executioner. I pulled out my phone. I texted David. We have enough. David texted back. More than enough. The audio is crystal clear. Kevin admitted the debt. Dad admitted the extortion. Mark admitted the blackmail. I fixed my hair. I reapplied my lipstick. I walked back out to the table, but I didn't sit down. Did you sign the papers? My father asked, pushing a document towards me. I picked up the document. I ripped it in half. What the hell are you doing? Kevin screamed. I'm not signing anything, I said, my voice strong, loud, filling the room. And neither are you. You think you can play games with us? My father stood up, his face red. I will ruin you. You already tried, I said, 20 years ago. You failed. I pointed to the flower arrangement. Smile, Dad. You're on camera. His eyes darted to the flowers, then to the smoke detector, then to David, who was calmly packing up his briefcase. What is this? My mother whispered. This, I said, is the end of the Reynolds family reputation. The silence in the restaurant was heavier than the blizzard had been. Kevin was the first to react. He scrambled up, knocking his chair over. He lunged for the flower arrangement, ripping the orchids apart until he found the small black lens. It's a camera, he shrieked. She taped us. That's illegal. You can't use that. Actually, David said, his voice calm and professional, in this state, as long as one party consents to the recording, that being Jane, it is entirely legal. Also, this is a public place of business owned by my client. You have no expectation of privacy here. My father sank back into his chair. His face went from red to a terrifying shade of gray. You set us up. I invited you to dinner, I said, crossing my arms. You're the ones who ordered the extortion special. Give me the tape, Kevin growled, moving towards me. He looked dangerous now, like a cornered animal. Give me the damn tape, Jane, or I swear to God. Sit down, Kevin, I said. I wasn't afraid. The footage is already cloud-synced. It's on 3 different servers. David has a copy. My security team has a copy. What do you want? My mother hissed. She wasn't crying now. You want to humiliate us? Is that it? Revenge? I want you to leave us alone, I said. Forever. We can't, Kevin yelled. You don't understand. If I don't pay them by Friday,
He started to hyperventilate. "They'll break my legs, Jane. They said they'll kill me." I looked at my brother, the boy I used to share toys with, the boy who watched silently from the stairs while our parents threw me out into the snow. "That sounds like a you problem," I said coldly. "Jane," my mother gasped, "he's your brother. You have $20 million. You can save him." "I can," I agreed, "but I won't, because that money isn't mine. It's Leo's and Martha's." "Martha is dead," my father slammed his fist on the table. "She was a senile old bat who turned you against your own blood. Don't you dare speak her name." I stepped forward.
She was more of a parent to me in one day than you were in 17 years. Look, Mark interrupted, holding up his hands. I didn't mean any of that stuff. I was just joking about the blackmail. I'm just a guy trying to reconnect, right? He started backing towards the door. "I'm just gonna go." "Sit down, Mark," David ordered. "If you leave, I call the police immediately and file charges for attempted extortion. We have you on tape asking for $2 million. Mark froze. He sat back down looking like he was about to vomit. "Here is what is going to happen," David said, pulling a new stack of documents from his briefcase. "This is a confession. It states that all allegations you made against Jane and Leo Reynolds are false, that the grandparents' rights suit is frivolous, that Mark Sloan admits he is not seeking custody and has no relationship with the child. And," I added, "it includes a permanent restraining order. You will never contact me, Leo, or my staff again. You will not come within 500 feet of my restaurants or Leo's hospital." "And if we don't sign?" my father sneered, trying to regain some shred of dignity. "Then I release the tape," I said. "Tonight, to Channel 7, to the police. You'll be disbarred, Dad. Mom, you'll be a pariah at the country club. Kevin, well, the police might actually be safer for you than your loan sharks. At least in prison, the mob can't get to you as easily." My father looked at the document. His hand was shaking. He looked at my mother. She looked away, defeated. "You're a monster," my father whispered.
"I learned from the best," I replied. He picked up the pen. I watched as Carter Reynolds, the man who cared more about his signature than his daughter, signed his name. Then my mother. Then Kevin. Then Mark. "Done," David said, collecting the papers. "Now get out." They stood up, shamed, broken. They shuffled towards the door, a pathetic parade of selfishness. But just as Kevin reached the door, he turned back. A nasty, spiteful look crossed his face. "You think you won," Kevin spat. "But you know what? That old lady, Martha, she died alone, just like you will. At least we have each other." "Kevin," my mother hissed, pulling him out the door. I stood there in the empty restaurant. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted.
"Are you okay?" David asked, putting a hand on my arm.
"They signed," I said, looking at the papers. "It's over." "Not yet," David said. "We still have the court date on Monday to formally dismiss the case. And we haven't played the poison pill card yet." "Do we need to?" I asked. "They signed the confession." "Kevin is desperate," David said. "Desperate people do stupid things. He signed this to buy time, but he still needs that money by Friday. He's going to try something else. I can feel it." I looked at the surveillance monitor, watching their car peel out of the parking lot. "You're right," I said. "They admitted the truth here, in private. But they haven't admitted it to the world. They still have their reputation. As long as they think they can save face, they'll keep coming." I picked up the USB drive containing the recording of the dinner. "Kevin said Martha died alone," I whispered, anger flaring up again. "She died holding my hand. He doesn't know what love is." I turned to David. "Prepare the press release," I said. "We're not just filing these documents. We're going to expose them. If Kevin wants to talk about dying alone, let's see how he does when the whole world knows he tried to sell his nephew to pay a gambling debt." "Jane," David warned, "if you release this, it's total war." "I know," I said. I thought of the snow. I thought of Leo. I thought of the slap. War is all they understand. Monday morning arrived with the heaviness of a funeral.
The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain, mirroring the knot of dread sitting in my stomach. Even though I had the confession signed at the restaurant, David had warned me, desperate people don't follow rules. He was right. At 8 a.m., just as we were pulling up to the courthouse, David's phone rang. He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening, the skin around his eyes crinkling in frustration. He hung up and looked at me. "They filed an emergency motion to quash the agreement," David said, his voice dangerously low. "They're claiming the confession at the restaurant was signed under duress. They say you hired thugs to threaten them. They're claiming the recording is deepfake technology." I stared at the courthouse steps. They're lying. Again.
It's a delay tactic, David explained, gathering his files. Kevin needs that money by Friday. Today is Monday. If they can get the judge to freeze the assets for an audit today, Kevin might be able to use the potential frozen assets as leverage for a loan shark extension. It's a Hail Mary. We walked into the building. The air inside smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. There they were. My parents, Kevin, and Mark. They had clearly spent the weekend strategizing. My father was wearing a neck brace now, an upgrade from the sling. My mother was weeping into a lace handkerchief, looking frail and elderly. Kevin was pacing, his eyes darting around like a trapped rat. But the biggest surprise was their new lawyer. Standing next to Mr. Sterling was a shark I recognized from the news, Marcus Thorne. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you were guilty as sin, but had enough money to bury the truth. "Where did they get the money for Thorne?" I whispered to David. "Credit," David surmised, or Kevin promised him a cut of the inheritance. Thorne saw us and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator eyeing a wounded gazelle. We entered the courtroom. Judge Baker was presiding. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a reputation for having zero tolerance for theatrics. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Baker sat down and adjusted her glasses. "I have reviewed the motions."
The plaintiffs claim that the defendant, Jane Reynolds, used intimidation and coercion to obtain a settlement agreement on Saturday night. Mr. Thorne, you may proceed. Thorne stood up, buttoning his expensive suit. "Your Honor, my clients are elderly, fragile people. They went to dinner hoping for a reconciliation. Instead, they were ambushed. Miss Reynolds had the room bugged. She threatened to ruin their reputation. She threatened physical violence. They signed that paper because they were terrified for their lives." My mother let out a loud, shuddering sob on cue. "She's so cruel," she whispered loudly enough for the mic to pick up. I clenched my fists under the table. The audacity was breathtaking. They were projecting their own sins onto me. "Miss Reynolds," the judge turned to David. "Your response?" David stood up calmly. "Your Honor, the meeting was recorded. The video clearly shows Miss Reynolds was calm, seated, and made no physical threats. The only threats made were by Mr. Kevin Reynolds, who threatened to destroy my client's business if his gambling debts were not paid." "Fabrication!" Kevin shouted, jumping up. "That tape is doctored." "Sit down," Judge Baker snapped. She looked at Kevin with disdain. "One more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." "Your Honor," Thorne continued smoothly, ignoring his client's stupidity, "we are asking for an immediate freeze of the Martha Higgins estate. We have reason to believe Miss Reynolds is embezzling funds meant for her son." "We are petitioning for emergency guardianship of Leo Reynolds to protect his financial future." I looked at Leo, sitting in the gallery behind me. He was stone-faced. He had taken the day off work to be here. He gave me a small nod. "Stay strong." "I'm inclined to order an audit," Judge Baker said, leafing through the papers. "Given the size of the estate and the allegations of coercion." My heart stopped. If she ordered an audit, it would tie everything up for months. It would give them a foothold. It would give Kevin a lifeline. "Your Honor," David interrupted, his voice ringing clear in the courtroom. "Before you rule, we would like to present a piece of evidence that was part of the original last will and testament of Martha Higgins." "A piece of evidence that makes this entire lawsuit moot." "Is this new evidence?" Thorne objected. "We haven't seen this." "It was in the sealed portion of the probate file," David said, to be opened only in the event of a contestation by biological relatives. Since the plaintiffs are contesting the will and demanding guardianship, the seal is broken. Judge Baker looked interested. Proceed. David pulled out a thumb drive. We have a video statement from the deceased and a clause known as the poison pill. My father's had snapped up. The neck brace made him turn his whole body. He looked confused. Poison pill? I turned to look at them. I wanted to memorize this moment. The moment before the avalanche. Please play the video, Judge Baker ordered.
The bailiff connected the drive. The large screens on the walls flickered to life. And there was Martha. The courtroom went silent. Even my mother stopped her fake crying. In the video, Martha was sitting in her library. She looked directly into the lens, her eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and iron will. "Hello, Judge." Martha's voice filled the room, raspy and commanding. "If you are watching this, it means Carter and Margaret Reynolds, or perhaps their son Kevin, or that waste of space Mark, have come looking for money." A gasp went through the gallery. My father's face turned a deep, unhealthy shade of purple. "I want to be very clear," Martha continued. "I did not leave $20 million to Jane because she is my friend. I left it to her because she is the only mother Leo has ever known. The Reynolds family threw her out like trash. They do not get to rummage through the dumpster now that they think there's gold inside." Kevin was shaking his head. "No, no." "Therefore," Martha said, leaning forward, "I invoke Clause 14b. In the event of any legal action, custody battle, or demand for financial oversight filed by the Reynolds family or Mark Sloan, the trust is immediately dissolved." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "The entire sum, all cash, stocks, and liquidated assets, will be automatically transferred to the New Beginnings Shelter for Teen Moms and the National Center for Victims of Narcissistic Abuse. Leo gets nothing, Jane gets nothing. And you, Carter, you get absolutely nothing." Martha smiled one last time. Checkmate. The screen went black. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then, chaos broke. "No!" The scream didn't come from me. It came from Kevin. He scrambled over the divider, his eyes bulging. "No, she can't do that. That's illegal. You can't just burn the money." "Restrain him!" Judge Baker shouted, banging her gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" 2 bailiffs grabbed Kevin, who was flailing wildly. "I need that money! You don't understand! They're going to kill me!" "Mr. Thorne," Judge Baker's voice cut through the noise like a knife, "did you know about this clause?" Thorne looked pale. He was flipping through the attached documents David had just handed him. I was not informed of the sealed codicil, Your Honor." "It's a standard conditional bequest," David said calmly. "Perfectly legal. Martha Higgins had the right to put conditions on her gift. The condition was simple: leave Jane and Leo alone. By filing this lawsuit, the plaintiffs have triggered the clause. The transfer was automated to occur upon the filing of a contestation." David tapped his laptop. "In fact, the bank just notified me. The funds have been dispersed. The accounts are empty." My father stood up. He ripped off his neck brace, forgetting his injury in the heat of the moment. You let us sue you. You knew. You let us destroy the inheritance." "I tried to stop you," I said, standing up. I turned to face him. "I offered you a settlement at the restaurant. I offered you a chance to walk away with your dignity. You got greedy. You wanted it all." You bitch!" my mother shrieked, her facade of the frail old lady completely gone. She looked feral. "You stole our retirement. We have nothing. We mortgaged the house for this lawsuit." "That sounds like a poor financial decision," I said, echoing the words my father had said to me 20 years ago when I asked for help with medical bills. Judge Baker looked at the Reynolds family with open disgust. "The court finds that the plaintiffs were fully aware of the defendant's reluctance to engage. You pushed this. You filed the motions. You triggered the clause. The estate is gone. There are no assets to audit. There is no money for a trust." But what about the visitation? Thorne tried to pivot, desperate to save something. The grandparents' rights? Denied. Judge Baker slammed the gavel. Based on the video evidence of Mr. Reynolds assaulting the defendant and the audio evidence of extortion, I am granting a permanent restraining order, 500 feet, indefinitely. Wait! Mark Sloan stood up, his hands shaking. I withdraw my claim. I don't want to be the dad. If there's no money, I'm out. Erase my name. Mr. Sloan, Judge Baker narrowed her eyes. You admitted on public record you only wanted custody for financial gain. You have wasted this court's time. Your Honor, David interjected, we also have the matter of the fraudulent documents submitted by the plaintiffs to secure the emergency hearing.
We're done here, Kevin shouted, trying to shake off the bailiffs. Let me go. I have to leave town. I have to go. Not so fast, Mr. Reynolds. A booming voice came from the back of the courtroom. We all turned. 2 police officers and a man in a trench coat, a detective, were walking down the aisle. Kevin Reynolds? The detective asked. Kevin froze. His face went white. No, please. We have a warrant for your arrest, the detective said, pulling out handcuffs. Arrest? My mother gasped, clutching my father's arm. For what? He's a victim here. For embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion, the detective listed. We received a file from a Miss Jane Reynolds containing bank records showing unauthorized transfers from the Reynolds family accounts to illegal offshore gambling sites, as well as evidence of tax evasion. And, the detective added, looking at Mark, Mr. Sloan, we have you on a wiretap soliciting a bribe. You're coming too. The courtroom erupted again. I watched as the bailiffs handed Kevin over to the police. He was sobbing now, real, ugly tears. Mom, Dad, help me! Pay them! Pay the bail! Kevin screamed as he was dragged out. My father stood there, staring at his empty hands. He looked old, truly old. We can't, my father whispered, his voice trembling. We don't have any money left. They had bet everything on winning today. They had bet the house, their savings, their reputation. And they had lost. As the police led Mark and Kevin away, I walked over to my parents. They were huddled together at the plaintiff's table, looking like survivors of a shipwreck. Jane, my mother looked up at me. Her eyes were pleading. Jane, please, we're your parents. We're broke. They're going to take the house. Where will we go? I looked at them. I remembered the snow. I remembered the 10 minutes they gave me to pack. I remembered the deadbolt clicking shut. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a $20 bill. I placed it gently on the table in front of them. Here, I said softly, for a cab or a meal. Don't spend it all in one place. Jane, my father choked out. You have 10 minutes to clear the courtroom, I said, turning my back on them. Or the bailiff will remove you for trespassing. I walked back to David and Leo. Leo had tears in his eyes, but he was smiling. He hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. You did it, Mom, he whispered. You really did it. We did it, I corrected. We walked out of the courthouse and into the daylight. The rain had held off. The sun was breaking through the clouds. But as we reached the steps, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. Incoming transfer, $5 million. Source, the Martha Higgins Charitable Trust. Memo, administrator fee. I stopped. I looked at David. I thought the money was gone, I said. David smiled. A slow, lawyerly smile. The bulk of the estate went to charity, Jane, but Martha appointed you as the administrator of the donation. And administrators are entitled to a reasonable fee for their services. In this case, 25%. I stared at him. Martha? She knew you'd trigger the pill, David said. She wanted to make sure the charities got the money, yes, but she also knew that if you were smart enough to beat your parents, you deserved a reward that they couldn't touch. This fee is separate from the trust. It's yours, clean, untouchable. $5 million. My parents were bankrupt, Kevin was in jail, Mark was facing charges, and I was free. The days following the trial were a blur of headlines.
local doctor's family and explosive courtroom drama, poison pill, how a dead millionaire outsmarted greedy relatives, gambling, extortion, and lies, the fall of the Reynolds dynasty.
The public opinion, which had been so fickle, swung back to our side with the force of a tidal wave. The footage of Kevin screaming about his debts and my father trying to attack me went viral. The comments that used to call me cruel were now hailing me as a hero mother. But I didn't care about the fame. I cared about the silence. For the first time in 20 years, my phone didn't ring with threats. There were no mysterious cars parked outside my house, no reporters hiding in the bushes. 2 weeks after the trial, I decided I needed to close one final door. I drove to my parents' house in Connecticut, the house they had kicked me out of. It was in foreclosure. The bank had moved fast once the news of their financial ruin broke. There was a for sale sign on the lawn, leaning crookedly in the overgrown grass. I parked my car, a new one, bought with my own money, and walked up the driveway. The front door was unlocked. It was empty. My parents had been evicted 3 days prior. I heard they had moved into a small motel on the outskirts of town, living off Social Security. I walked into the foyer. The hardwood floors were scuffed. The spot where the vase of lilies used to stand was empty. The house smelled of dust and failure. I walked up the stairs to my old room. It was exactly as I had left it. They hadn't changed a thing. Not out of sentimentality, I realized, but out of laziness. They had simply closed the door and pretended I never existed. My bed was stripped. The desk where I used to do my homework was covered in dust. I opened the closet. On the floor, in the corner, was the other half of the photo I had ripped that night, the half with me in it. I picked it up. I looked at the 17-year-old girl in the picture. She looked so happy, so oblivious to the storm that was coming. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." Then I heard a noise downstairs. I froze. Was it them? Had they come back to squat? I walked down slowly, gripping my keys like a weapon. But it wasn't my parents. It was David. He was standing in the living room, looking at the empty fireplace. "How did you know I was here?" I asked. "Leo told me," David said. "He was worried you'd come here alone." "I just needed to see it," I said, "to make sure they were really gone." "They're gone, Jane." David walked over to me. "They're in the past. This house is just wood and brick now. The ghosts have been evicted." He took my hand. His palm was warm. "You know," David said softly, "you've spent 20 years running from this place, running from what they said you were, but you never stopped to look at what you ran towards." "What do you mean?" "You ran towards greatness, Jane. You built a life that is so much bigger than this little house. You raised a genius. You built a business. You saved yourself." He reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for 6 months," he said, pulling out a small velvet box, but the timing never felt right. With the lawsuit and Kevin and the chaos, I didn't want to add to the pressure. My breath hitched. "David," he got down on one knee, right there on the scuffed floors where my father had told me I was a disgrace, right in the spot where my mother had called me a whore. "Jane Reynolds," David said, his eyes shining, "you are the strongest, most brilliant, most beautiful woman I have ever known. I don't want to save you. You don't need saving. I just want to stand next to you while you conquer the world. Will you marry me?" I looked at him. Then I looked at the empty, silent house. This place had been the site of my greatest trauma, and now David was rewriting it. He was turning the scene of the crime into the scene of a new beginning. "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, David." 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on my finger. It was a vintage diamond, elegant and timeless, just like Martha would have loved. We kissed, and for the first time, the cold draft of that house didn't make me shiver. "Let's go," I said, pulling him towards the door. "I never want to come back here again." As we walked out, I didn't look back. I locked the door behind me, but this time, I wasn't the one being locked out. I was the one closing the chapter.
6 months later. The garden of the hearth was in full bloom. We had closed the restaurant for a private event, but the air was filled with the smell of roasting lamb and jasmine. It was our wedding day. Leo walked me down the aisle. He looked dashing in his tuxedo. He leaned over and whispered, "You look beautiful, Mom. Grandma Martha would have loved this dress." "She's here," I whispered back, touching the locket around my neck. Inside was a tiny picture of Martha and baby Leo. The ceremony was small, just close friends, my loyal staff. Betty was the maid of honor, obviously, and David's family, who had welcomed me with open arms. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Leo spoke up, his voice strong and clear. "She gives herself, but I stand with her." It was perfect. During the reception, I took a moment to step away from the dancing. I walked to the edge of the terrace, overlooking the city lights. I thought about the scorecard.
Kevin was currently serving a 5-year sentence in a minimum security prison for fraud. He had tried to call me once, collect. I declined the charge. I heard Sarah, his ex-wife, had testified against him to secure her own freedom. She was raising their kids far away from the toxic influence of the Reynolds clan. Mark Sloan had pleaded guilty to attempted extortion. He got probation and community service. He was currently picking up trash on the side of the highway. Poetic justice. And my parents? Last I heard, they were living in a small apartment in Arizona near my mother's estranged sister. They had no car, no country club membership, no reputation. They spent their days arguing over who was to blame for their downfall. They were alive, but they were irrelevant.
And to narcissists like them, irrelevance is a fate worse than death. Thinking about them? David asked, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. No, I smiled, leaning back into him. I was thinking about the foundation. With the $5 million administrator fee, plus the profits from the restaurants, we had launched the Martha Higgins Foundation. Our mission was simple. We provided legal aid, housing, and job training for pregnant teenagers who had been kicked out of their homes. We were building a safety net so that no girl would ever have to sleep in a concrete tunnel in the snow again. We admitted our first class of girls yesterday, David said. 10 of them. One wants to be a chef, another wants to be a surgeon. Full circle, I said. Leo joined us on the terrace. He held up a glass of champagne. To the future, Leo said. To the receipts, I laughed, clinking my glass against his. And to family, David added, the real kind. I looked at the 2 men I loved most in the world. I looked at the party inside, my staff, my friends, the people who had stood by me when I had nothing. Martha was right. Family isn't blood. It's not DNA. It's not a last name or an inheritance. Family are the people who show up when it's storming. Family are the people who help you pack your bags, not the ones who throw you out. Family are the ones who help you keep the receipts, and the ones who help you burn the bad memories. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. It didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like freedom. I turned back to the party.
The DJ started playing "I Will Survive." Betty was waving at me from the dance floor, beckoning me to join. "Coming," I yelled. I grabbed David's hand. I grabbed Leo's hand. "Let's dance," I said. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't look over my shoulder. I just looked forward. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story. I love you guys. See you in the next video.